Have you ever thought about how just one year can completely redefine a nation? Well, for England, that year was 1066. It's this incredible story of power, battle, and total transformation, and it all kicked off because a throne was suddenly left empty. So, picture this. At the start of that fateful year, you've got three powerful men from across Europe all looking at the English crown and saying, "That's mine." Each one of them was convinced it was their destiny, and none of them were going to back down. The conflicting ambitions were about to plunge the entire kingdom into chaos. But here's the thing. This isn't just a story about a battle. It's about how that chaos literally forged the England that we know today.
So, it all begins with a major crisis. In January of 1066, the King of England, Edward the Confessor, dies. The problem, he has no children, no direct heir. This created a massive, dangerous power vacuum, and yeah, three very ambitious men were more than ready to try and fill it.
So, let's meet the contenders for the ultimate prize, the English throne. First up, we've got the insider, Harold Godwinson. As the most powerful nobleman in England and the brother-in-law to the late king, he absolutely had the home field advantage. With the backing of the English lords, he wasted no time at all and had himself crowned king almost immediately.
Claimant number 2 was the formidable Harald Hardrada, the King of Norway. This guy was a legendary Viking warrior, and he saw a golden opportunity. He cited some old treaties and basically aimed to reclaim England for the Norse and restore a lost empire.
And finally, our third contender, William, the powerful Duke of Normandy. Now for William, this claim was personal. He insisted that King Edward had actually promised him the throne years earlier.
And this really boils the whole conflict down to its core. On one side, you've got Harold, the man on the spot, backed by the English aristocracy. On the other, you've got William, who claimed not only a promise from the dead king, but something more, an oath of support sworn by Harold himself. So for William, Harold's coronation wasn't just a political move, it was a deep, personal betrayal.
So King Harold is now trapped. He has a crown on his head, but his kingdom is about to be torn apart by two separate invasions from opposite directions at pretty much the same time. The pressure on the new king was just immense. The chaos really erupted in late September. Hardrada's Vikings invade the north and actually win an early victory. But just 5 days later, King Harold force marches his army north, catches the Vikings completely by surprise at Stamford Bridge, and just annihilates them. A brilliant, decisive win. But there was absolutely no time to celebrate. 3 days later, the news arrived. William had landed on the south coast, totally unopposed. Harold had to turn his exhausted army right back around and march 250 miles south to face a fresh, rested enemy.
And all of this leads to one place, a field near Hastings, on October 14th, 1066. This single day, this single battle, was going to decide the fate of England.
The two armies were a study in contrasts. The Anglo-Saxons were almost entirely infantry, built around their elite warriors, the housecarls. Their greatest strength was the shield wall, a nearly impenetrable defensive line. The Normans, though, were a modern combined arms force. They had archers, infantry, and their ultimate weapon, armored knights on horseback. It was a classic matchup, an immovable object versus an unstoppable force.
For hours, the English shield wall held firm, repelling wave after wave of Norman attacks. But William was a clever tactician. He ordered his knights to fake a retreat, trying to bait the English. And it worked. Pockets of English soldiers broke formation, chasing what they thought was a fleeing enemy, and that created the exact gaps William needed for his knights to exploit.
Then came the decisive blow. Amid all the chaos, King Harold was struck down, famously with an arrow to the eye. In that era, the king was the army's spirit. With him dead, the English shield wall and their resistance finally broke. The battle was over.
Harold's death wasn't just the end of a battle, it was the end of Anglo-Saxon England. William marched on London and was crowned king on Christmas Day 1066. He was now William the Conqueror, and the forging of a new England had begun.
The changes weren't small, they were total. William systematically replaced the entire English nobility with his own Norman followers. To dominate the land, they built these imposing stone castles. They introduced a new social order, a new language for the ruling class, and even a massive survey of the kingdom.
the Domesday Book, to catalog every last bit of their new wealth.
At the heart of this new order was the feudal system. Think of it as a pyramid of power and obligation. You have the king at the top who granted land to his loyal lords. In turn, those lords promised him knights and soldiers. It was a simple, kind of brutal, and incredibly effective system of control designed to hold a conquered nation in its grip.
But perhaps the most lasting legacy is the one you're hearing right now, the English language itself. For centuries, England became a nation of two tongues. The common people spoke Old English, while the courts and castles spoke Norman French. Over time, these two streams merged, creating Middle English. Words for government, law, and fine dining came from French, while the words of the farm and the home remained English. This fusion is the very foundation of the language we speak today.
So what's the ultimate takeaway? The Norman Conquest of 1066 slammed the door on Anglo-Saxon England. It severed old ties to Scandinavia and bound the nation's destiny, for better or worse, directly to the politics, culture, and conflicts of continental Europe.
Which leaves us with one final question to chew on. Was 1066 a brutal foreign conquest that destroyed a culture, or was it the violent but necessary birth of the nation we know today? As with all of history, the truth is rarely simple.